Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. It is 2026. This is my first podcast that I'm recording in the new year. And I'm just so delightful and so happy to be back. I had a wonderful holiday break. I did not post anything, and I really just took the time to reflect. And I did a lot of writing, and I spent a lot of time with family and friends, and actually a lot of time alone, which I do really like. And I'm so kind of refreshed and ready to get back at it. I feel really clear on how I want to show up and serve you guys, the listeners in this community, and people who read my Substack. And if you follow me on social and you only know me through Instagram or TikTok, please follow me along on Substack and follow along with the podcast. It's definitely where I do my deep dives. It's where I share more. It's where I give more of my life updates. It's definitely where I'm able to dive a little bit deeper on some of those same themes that I cover on social. Also, one of the things that I kind of recognized over the holiday break was that I really, there is something somewhat draining about posting all the time and feeling sort of obligated to do so. I feel much more connected, actually, even though I'm sitting here by myself at my desk recording this podcast, because I know and I can see that many of you are listening in different parts of the world and in different parts of this country. I'm in the United States. It just means the world to me. So my hope is that you're listening to this and maybe feeling a little bit of anchoredness, a little bit of groundedness after the holidays. And if not, that's okay too. I just did a poll on social asking people, are we feeling tired after the holidays? We're feeling pretty good. Are we still feeling overwhelmed? And I would say about 30% were like, nope, we're still overwhelmed. So I get it. I completely understand that. And I think we have to have ways to work through it. So I'm going to start this episode by talking a little bit about how I navigate New Year's resolutions. And you can feel free to adopt this practice too. And it's not too late, even though we're in the new year. I think it's a really great way to approach really a lot of different shifts in life and beginnings and endings. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And that's going to segue right into boundaries and how we have to set and hold boundaries, both for ourselves and for our kids. So, if that feels like something challenging to you right now, meaning like you try to set boundaries with your kids, but it somehow goes nowhere, or you struggle to tell people no, or you struggle with the idea of taking on too much and then maybe growing resentful, we're going to unpack that a little bit. And I'm going to share the strategies that I often get asked about, which are questions like, well, how do you stay calm? And how do you, Albiona, stay calm? And, I'm going to share with you some of the practices that I have been using and do use to really steady me and ground me. And if you are needing sort of a little bit more guidance on this, I am going to do a whole series on Substack for my paid tier where I'm going to show up and do a live workshop over Zoom because I really want you to feel guided in this. And I also want you to feel supported and also know that it isn't easy. I think sometimes we say something like, just stay calm, as if it's this very sort of easy, accessible state. And for many people, it just feels like nails on a chalkboard to hear somebody give you that advice. So I'm going to sort of distill it down over on Substack and really give you tangible tools to really use and ways to look at getting really centered and grounded and being able to find calm in moments when it feels impossible. So let's jump to it. So first off and foremost, I don't like New Year's resolutions. I'm actually not a big goal setter. I don't love them. I don't love setting goals. I know it like goes against what every mindset coach probably teaches you, which is like create measurable goals and the more specific the goal, the more likely you are to achieve that goal and things like that. And look, I'm not going to say that's not true. I'm certain there's a lot of research that probably supports that. I think there's a lot of, beauty in the idea of really looking forward and going like, I want to be able to work out twice a week, or I want to be able to eat 5 healthy meals, or 5 healthy dinners throughout the week. I'm not saying not to do it. I'm just telling you my process. For me, as somebody who spent a lot of time really policing myself, meaning like I just used to spend so much time, especially in my 20s and 30s, kind of constantly like, doing things like don't be too much, don't eat too much, don't do this too much, and really like always disciplining myself, right? Always kind of having a very tight grasp on like what I would allow myself to do and very cognizant of what other people thought and how I was appearing and what I was doing. And so I've unpacked so much of this, I would say, in the last decade, and I feel like I've totally come through on the other side. Not, 100%, but I'm definitely someone who can spot it very quickly when I start to go down those rabbit holes. And one of the things that I have found is that if I set really specific goals for myself, that starts to turn into somewhat obsessive thinking. Like I can become very hard on myself very quickly. The inner critic turns on and gets pretty loud. And it's like, hey, you said you were going to do this. I don't see you doing it. Da, da, da. So for me, it just usually breeds a lot of some of those same habits I used to hold on to in terms of really kind of trying to really keep myself small to some extent is the best way I would say it. So with that, I a long time ago stopped doing resolutions. And really in general, I'm not really a big goal setter. I mean, I work with business coaches that are fantastic and they always kind of do the let's project and let's forecast and I don't. And I just don't do it because what I really am trying to think about being someone who is deeply sensitive, deeply intuitive, deeply empathic is I really want to think more about how do I want to feel? Like what is the feeling and the energetics I'm trying to usher in? I'm not really thinking about how that will happen. I really am releasing the how to something bigger than myself and allowing myself to be guided in this process. So for me, when I think about what I really learned in 2025 and what I want to continue to lean into in 2026 is that I really like spaciousness. I like space in my day. I like time. I really like things that help bring ease to my life. So anything that feels light, anything that helps me feel light. I like slowing down. Like I really, really love slow mornings. That's one of the things I appreciate most in my life. I really like taking my time doing something. I sort of wasn't this way for a very long time. I mean, I was in a very sort of competitive graduate program. I was very much like an achiever and a type A personality. And I've released a lot of that. Like now I would definitely like enjoy doing something just for the sake of doing it with no attachment to outcome. So those are just some of the feelings that I'm looking to usher in more of in 2026. And with that, I can share one of my favorite authors, and I wrote about this in Substack, Ozan Varol. He wrote one of my favorite books called Awaken Your Inner Genius. I think it's either Awaken Your Genius or Awaken Your Inner Genius. But anyways, he writes this newsletter every week, and it's so good. And one of the things he talked about in terms of resolutions was or it actually wasn't even resolutions, it was just this idea of letting go. And I always feel like the end of a year, the end of anything, always kind of asks us to what are we letting go of and what are we welcoming in. And I like doing this not from a specific goal setting standpoint, but more from what I just mentioned of like, what do I want to feel in 2026? How do I want to be in 2026? What are things that align with that feeling? What are things that align with that state of mind and that state of being? And like, what are the things I can say yes to that will support these things? And what are some things that I want to say no to because they wouldn't support these things? So he says, letting go isn't the hard part. It's staying. That's the hard part. And it's so true. So like, if we just broke this up with an example. In his newsletter, he's talking about how him and his wife decided that they wanted to move. And I want to say that they were originally in the city and then they decided to move out into maybe more of the suburbs or just more open spaces. And when you decide to let go, I think there is a liberation that comes with that, a sense of like, oh, that felt really good. And yes, and this is a full body yes, and all the things that we sort of hear people say. But there is this moment that comes once you're in motion, in the newness of it, where it feels so scary. I can remember this when I left my job. I loved my job. I had a great job. And I knew I was being called to do something different, to show up in a new way. And when I first decided to let go and say, like, okay, I'm going to throw caution to the wind here and I'm going to take this leap of faith, there was something about it that was really invigorating and exciting. But I can tell you with certainty, those first 6 months were so terrifying. There were multiple times I just wanted to run back into the space of safety, into familiarity, to choose the things that I know, to choose the things that felt like I could control. It felt terrible being in an unknown space with uncertainty all around me. But there was also this deep, deep knowing that I had to stay. I had to stay. So in the same way he's describing this move with his wife, there is this urge to just go back to what he knows, to go back to the neighborhood he's familiar with, to go back to the streets that he knows. And ultimately, he knows at the same time that this newness that he's welcomed in is where he needs to stay. So that's how I really crafted and thought about what I wanted to you know, consider as 2025 ended and where I wanted to go in 2026. So 2025 became the year where I really let go of a lot. And as I enter 2026, I'm really thinking about where am I going to stay? I'm going to stay in my power. I'm going to stay in my knowing. I'm going to stay in the slowness of things. I'm going to stay in the space that doesn't say urgency is the answer. I'm going to stay in the space where I can set boundaries that protect myself and my time and really my peace. So I will get comfortable saying no to things that I typically would say yes to, or doing things out of obligation. So where I will stay will likely cause some discomfort, will likely make me say, just go ahead and say yes. It'll be so much easier to just say yes than to deal with the conflict that might follow, or to feel so like I've just disappointed somebody. So that's just going to feel so horrible. So I'm just going to bypass that and go back to what's familiar. It's so easy to do that, but I have to really honor what did I let go of. And in order to really honor that, we have to give ourselves permission to stay in the new space. So I unpack this in the Substack newsletter. It's called Letting Go Isn't the Hard Part, It's This. And I give you very specific examples of how this shows up for me. But let's kind of segue this into a little bit of self parenting and parenting our kids. And where it comes up for me a lot is boundaries. So I was talking with Cindy Hovington, Dr. Cindy Hovington. She's been on the podcast and she's wonderful. She's a neuroscientist who specializes in helping kids and adults regulate their emotions. She has a strong focus on that in terms of her work. And she said this, and I've said it over and over after hearing her say it, is that setting boundaries isn't the hard part, it is holding them. And it makes me think of Ozan Varol's quote as well, because he says, obviously, letting go is not the hard part, it's staying. So when we set a boundary, and if we think about this through the lens of parenting, you're probably really good at telling your kids, stop, no, don't, cut it out. I told you not to do that. We're really good at saying the thing we want. We're really good at trying to direct our kids. We're really good at talking. I always tell parents, like, even if as clients come on board and when I'm coaching parents, one of the first things I say is, I'm going to tell you over and over, stop talking, don't talk so much, don't talk to them. Like, it's such a deep seated thing in us that we need to keep teaching and explaining. And really, the hardest part is backing away and letting our kids learn from experiences, particularly hard experiences, moments when they don't get what they want. They grow very dysregulated. We desperately want to fix it, change it, adjust it, or punish the fact that they're not accepting it. And so we become very reactive and emotionally dysregulated right alongside them. So this, in turn, doesn't really create the outcome that we want, because we just feel completely spent, and we also feel like we didn't meet our child's emotional and developmental needs. So it really does take time. But what I want to highlight is this, that it's the staying that's the hard part. So in coaching, often when I'm teaching parents new habits, and this is also true of my life coaching clients, I do a lot around this idea of like parenting yourself back home, really inner parenting yourself. And I don't like the phrase reparenting, because I think it makes us think that something was wrong in our childhood. And I want to caveat this by saying, even if something was wrong in your childhood, does not mean that you deserved it. It certainly means you want to honor it and work through it. However, when I talk about parenting ourselves, it's this idea of picking up the baton where you are right now and creating this inner process where you love yourself so unconditionally and you parent yourself through different moments of adversity, challenge, hardship, or through joy, through happiness. But it's that you become your own inner parent. And so I do life coaching with this as well. And one of the things that arises is like, as we're starting to implement new things or things that might not feel quite so familiar to us, the desire to go back to what we know is very high. I mean, this is true in all instances of life. So staying, again, holding that boundary becomes the challenge. I've talked about this on other podcasts, but there's 4 specific reaction types that I unpack a lot when I work with clients, which is, when our kids grow upset or there's conflict, we can either become the punisher, which is like we just escalate with them and go from 0 to 100 and we just want it to stop. We could be the adjuster. This is the parent who's so uncomfortable watching their child in discomfort that discomfort breeds too much discomfort in you. So now we start to adjust our boundary. Again, we're not able to stay. We're not able to hold it because we just desperately need this to shift and stop. There's the panicked parent. This is my panickers. These are my parents who are so dysregulated the second their own child becomes dysregulated. It almost presents as anxiousness, that they're the over explainers. They're the ones who desperately want their child to agree with the boundary. I'm doing this for your good. This is important. We have to do this. We can't have junk food right now. It's not good for our bodies. It hurts our bellies. It makes us lose energy. We're not as strong. Like, we're the ones who are just giving our kids constant explanations one after the other, because we just want them to see why we're imposing this discomfort on them, and we want to be justified. And then the last one is the avoider, right? The avoidant parent is the one who's like, their child grows really dysregulated, or they push back against a boundary, and we just freeze. This is very much a freeze response. It's like, I don't even know what to do anymore. Like, whatever, whatever. It's kind of a hands up in the air, a resigned feeling of like, I feel beaten this, like, I don't know what to do. And that's its own form of reactivity, because when we underreact, it can be just as damaging as when we overreact. So when we think about this idea of letting go and staying being the hard part, being the hardest part, or when we look at that through the lens of the boundary setting, which is setting is the easy part, it's holding that's the hard part, it's the same exact thing at play here. What's happening is we're so uncomfortable. We're uncomfortable watching our kids struggle. We're uncomfortable looking at our child who is quote unquote behaving badly the way we see it. And that feels like too much. It's like an assault on our parenting. It's an assault on who we are, right? A lot of people tell me I feel so competent at work, and I go in there and I do my job and I'm really good at it. And I know I'm doing a good job and I feel productive. And I come home and I just don't feel that way. I feel like I'm missing the mark. I feel like I'm constantly in struggle. I feel like I'm battling things that don't even seem to make sense. Everything I seem to try doesn't work. And so when we have this complete kind of this duality or this polarity in terms of like feeling really competent and successful in one area of our lives, and then being brought to our knees by a child in the other context, can just feel so defeating, right? So what we want to think about is, one, what comes up for you if we look at it through the lens of that boundary piece, the setting and holding being the hardest, the staying. And we can look at it that way. What feels most difficult, I think, for most parents or life coaching clients is that we tell ourselves that in order for a boundary to be right, we need agreement. So there is this piece of us that is still seeking external validation for the justification of the boundary. So let's look at it personally and let's look at it in parenting. So let's say you tell your child they can't have a cookie before dinner. They get very upset. You explain to them all the science behind what happens to their blood sugar levels, the cortisol spikes, how the sugar is so bad for them. They need nutritious food, blah, 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 right? This is not effective because your child actually doesn't care. And you are feeling so uncomfortable that you are causing this to them. That's how you see it. My boundary, their discomfort is a result of my boundary. I wish they would just agree with me. So I am going to pepper them with so much information that they will have no choice but to see it my way. They certainly will understand. So when we do this, we use things like logic and reasoning to get our kids on board, and it really does not work. It really doesn't work. I mean, if there's anything you take away from this episode, just let it be that. Instead, what your child would benefit from is a quick moment of empathy. I know it's so hard when we don't get what we want, but we're not having a cookie right now. And a clear statement of the boundary. Let them dysregulate. Let them get upset. This is where we do our own inner work. And I know because I coach families, and a lot of times they'll say, okay, but I still have to like cook dinner, and they're hanging on me, or they're screaming, or they're crying, or they're doing whatever. There's a lot we can unpack there, but I would ultimately tell you, you're going to first test this. We practice this in moments when you're available to allow them to dysregulate while working on yourself. Next, we start to infuse this into real moments, right? Because I understand I'm a parent myself. I've raised young children who are now older. I have worked with thousands of kids throughout the years. I totally get it. But at the same time, once you learn to steady yourself, what starts to happen now is I can put you in any given situation, and that same dysregulation occurs from your child. You now have a new little muscle that you've been tending to, and it's working. So now you're going to stay really anchored and steady. And I promise you what starts to happen is they de-escalate so much faster. So you could just easily move them off of your leg when you're trying to cook. You could let them hang on your leg while you're cooking and don't continue to talk to them. You could move them to a space and have them stay put and take a 5-minute break from cooking and just do a break with them, which is something I work on a lot in coaching. It's something Joe Newman talks about if you've listened to the episodes where he's been on the Parenting Reframe a lot. But it's the idea that they can't proceed or do anything else until they have calmed themselves down for 1 full minute. So you could just pause from cooking if you had to. Again, there are a lot of ways and strategies we unpack this, but what you want to think about is working first on just yourself and noticing when you begin to explain, recognizing that, like, oh, I'm looking for agreement and I actually don't need agreement. Boundaries in general are not crowd pleasers. Most people don't like it. Most kids don't like it, but it doesn't mean they're wrong. So these are the parents who will come to me and say something like, hey, it's not working. I did what you said in the video and it's not working. And if I push back and say, tell me what's not working or how you know it's not working, they'll say because they get upset. So if our aim is to dodge upset feelings or to avoid our kids getting mad, that's not effective, right? Because now all we're doing is we're just trying to bypass all these emotions that they need to actually experience and work through and realize it doesn't change the outcome. So our task has to be, how do we manage our own emotions, hold the boundary, and make sure that they recognize that their emotional response does not have the capacity to change the outcome. So it's the holding of the boundary that becomes so hard. Let's look at it in our personal lives. So I'm working with a life coaching client, and she really struggles with sort of this protection of her time, we'll say. And one of the things that she defaults to is over explaining when she feels like she can't commit to something. And what comes up in her is this feeling of such overwhelm that she will disappoint the other person because she has learned in her life that so much of her own safety is in the way others see her, and more importantly, how liked she is. And I can certainly relate to this. I talked about this at the top of the podcast about, I certainly did this a lot in my 20s and teen years for sure, and probably even into my early 30s. And what happens is when she has to decline, she is very uncomfortable. And so she'll say, I can't, but I just want you to know. And it comes with just a myriad of explanations and anxiousness and a feeling of what if they don't like me? What if I disappoint them? I probably should be making changes to my plans to be there for them, right? There's even a lot of internal conflict that will arise. And so what we're doing in that moment is we are still setting the boundary, but we are looking for that same agreement. We desperately want the other person to go, oh my gosh, don't worry about it. No, don't, please. It's no problem. It's no problem. We need agreement from the other person to let us know that the boundary was fair. And so the work really becomes checking in first with ourselves to say, what is the boundary I need, right? Same thing from a parenting lens. What is the boundary my child needs? Will I feel uncomfortable when I set this boundary? If it's a personal need like my client, yes, you will, because this is still something she's working through. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. I'm safe in my discomfort. I'm safe in this moment. Even though I feel unsettled, safety lives within. These are all things we want to continue to say to ourselves as we work through this. For our kids, it's hard to watch my child in discomfort. It's hard to know my boundary is doing this, but I am safe and so is he. I am safe and so is he. Discomfort doesn't mean unsafe. Discomfort means growth. Discomfort means love is entering. So when we can reframe these things, we can start to sit with it and build some resilience around it. So for my life coaching client, when we talked about this idea of like, let's practice this and let's set some boundaries and let's not give an explanation. That's the homework. Just say, I would love to, but I just can't. I can't this time. Thank you for thinking of me. And just leave it there. And this was hard for her, but she did it. She did it. And she did not wait for or rely on agreement from the other person. And she's had different scenarios present. In one scenario, the person was like, oh my gosh, no problem. Catch you next time. And in another one, that was like, oh gosh, that's a bummer. I really was hoping you would say yes. Right? Now that's a test. Right? That's a test because that's the universe saying, are you going to really protect your peace? Are you going to really put yourself first in your needs? So her knee-jerk reaction was to pivot, to adjust, to change the boundary, because again, we default back to that idea that agreement is where I'm safe. But she knew, because we'd been working together for enough time and we've done so much practice, that she was able to pause, right? This is where we use PAR. I desperately want to change my answer and adjust the boundary because I hate that they feel uncomfortable with my decision. Maybe I should go. I don't know. Acknowledge, right? She's just acknowledging. I feel unsettled when I think the other person doesn't like my decision. And now we respond. What do I need? When you're doing the response for your child, what does my child need in this moment? That my life coaching client needed time, needed a sense of peace, did not need another commitment. So then we reflect in the life coaching client's reflection. We look at what is it about needing that agreement that makes us feel safe? What is it that tells us we're not safe when we don't have that same agreement? What is the narrative or the story we're telling ourselves when we put ourselves first? This is so, so triggering for so many women. If I say to a woman, like, what would it feel like to put your needs before your kids? Like, let's say you have plans to go with your friends to dinner and your kids are getting super upset that you're not the one putting them to sleep. This is a real scenario that comes up all the time with my coaching clients. They desperately want to cancel their plans with their friends. And they'll say things like this: I'll go to dinner, that's fine. I'm not going to enjoy it though. Because all I'm going to be thinking about is my kids struggling at home with their dad, bedtime being a disaster, which then means the morning's going to be no good, and then my day's going to be a disaster, and the 2-hour dinner with my friends isn't worth it. So do you see how quickly we sort of abandon ourselves moment after moment after moment, instead of saying to yourself, you know what, the only way is through. So multiple things can be true at one time. They might struggle with their dad, but it's also really good because they have to have practice, and so does dad, being able to be the one to deal with them when they're having a hard time. Number two, I've got to sit in the discomfort, my own discomfort of what it means to put myself first, even though I know it's a need. I want my kids to see that. I want my kids to see that parents can live their lives, and I want them to grow up in a world where they know that for themselves when they become adults. It might mean that tonight's not going to feel like a great night at dinner, but this is a need, because my value, my safety doesn't live in the way others see me and in that agreement. So for kids, like I said, it's the same thing. It's like we want to go through it, not avoid it. So that's where staying becomes hard. That's where holding the boundary becomes hard. But you want to pay attention to what comes up for you when you're setting boundaries, both with your kids, in your personal life, and where are you looking for agreement? Where are you looking for the other person to say, yep, no problem. And that then all of a sudden makes your shoulders drop and you go, phew. Or when you set a boundary for your child and they don't cry and you're like, yes, oh my gosh. You know, again, those are great moments, by the way. I'm not telling you to not feel it, but you cannot need it. Meaning the boundary has to come from this knowing within that regardless of how this lands, I can manage it and so can they. I can manage it, so can they. The more steady, anchored, and rooted you are, your kids feel that, and they start to feel safer and safer because your responses become more consistent and predictable and less panicked or dysregulated, the punisher, or the adjuster, right? That's the one that's like, oh, I don't know, maybe never mind. Let's fine, 5 more minutes. Just this one time though. And now we sort of give the impression that we can be pushed over. So all this to say is to spend some time noticing, spend some time observing what comes up for you when you're setting these boundaries, both with your kids and in your personal life. Where do you need to parent differently when you're setting these boundaries? And where do you need to parent yourself differently when you're setting boundaries? So I hope that helps. Like I said, subscribe to my Substack. I'm going to do a total deep dive on this, you guys, through the month of January. Definitely consider, if you're able to, be a part of that paid community. I really want this space to be somewhere where you feel nurtured and seen and supported. Questions are asked, comments are expressed. We get on live calls together. It's really where we do the deep dive, the deep work. And again, I would love to just say it's only about parenting, but if this idea resonates with you, this idea of like, yes, I want to parent my child, but gosh, I would love these same tools for myself, then you have found your home. You have found the place where you need to be, because that's exactly what I consider myself to sort of be a guide in. Like, not only are we parenting our kids, but ultimately we have to teach ourselves how to parent ourselves back home. Feel steady in our bodies, feel good in our energy, feel good in the decisions that we're making, feel good when we make a mistake, and welcome in whatever comes in and what lessons need to be there. but we do this work together. We do it in community. We do it with others where we can see ourselves. So it would be an honor if you would let me guide you through this, whether that's coaching or whether that's being part of this paid community on Substack. Please, please, please consider doing it. It's really where I really do best in connection with others. It's sort of my essence and then how I'm meant to serve. So with that, I will leave you guys. Feel free to reach out and leave messages or email me. You can go into the show notes. There are probably everything I mentioned will be linked there. So until next time, guys, thank you so much for being here.